Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Space Force mascot Moonicles. Today, with the generals and the magnificent Underland journey. Diary entry from 22nd August 2020. I was riding along the old Potsdamer Landstraße to visit the Cossack general by the police cavalry headquarters. The 7-day heat wave was coming to an end with the waxing moon, and little gray clouds were hovering in the air above. Not knowing where to go, I asked the lady at the gift shop for an overview of the facility, and she gave me a small paper map for orientation. I passed some joggers and left the main road for a narrow path into the forest, where overgrown graves were becoming one with nature, and the names written in stone were fading away. I followed the bees and the birds and enjoyed the peaceful symphony of the high trees, when I came to a crossroads, and there I discovered the ruins of a sunken ship. Disregarding the rusty little chain, I entered the ship and walked through the grass growing from the cracks, and up 3 moss-covered steps onto the round stern underneath the gnarly branches of an old cedar. There I stood, thinking, this would be a good place to meet, when suddenly the sun turned black and the ground was thundering as if I was standing in the middle of 5,000 galloping horses. The horses passed, and from the south came the thunder that brought the rain. It rained and rained in complete darkness for hours or days. And when it stopped raining, I found myself on a lake in a cave with walls made of crystals that were shining in all colors of the rainbow. I could hardly believe my eyes, and in total awe I stood, facing my next mission as first Space Force mascot. I was received by an emperor penguin that wore a green hat and carried a sword on his hip. And when my feet touched the ground, he said, "Welcome to Underland, the home away from home." He turned around, and I followed him out of the cave and into a tunnel that led to a high hall with a glass roof. There I saw 13 tall men in uniform talking around a table, when the Emperor Penguin bluntly announced, right there and then, "We have a visitor." He then disappeared before my eyes, and the men stood up straight and looked at me in disbelief, and it was so quiet that I could hear my own heart beat. The first asked, "What is that?" The second asked, "How did it get here?" And the third asked, "Is this a joke?" Nobody was laughing, and the man standing closest pointed his finger at me and said, "It could be a bomb." At this point, I felt it was a good idea to jump in the conversation, and, showing my hands, I said, "I'm not a bomb." Surprised to see that I could talk, they murmured amongst themselves, and I continued to answer their first and second question. "I'm the first Space Force mascot, and I got here on a ship." Again, they murmured. And then they asked, "How did you get the fuel?" I answered, "I don't know. The sun turned black and then it started to rain." This time they murmured much louder, and when they finished murmuring, they asked me to join the round table. There, I told them everything they wanted to know about the cemetery and the overgrown graves and stones, how I was looking for the general and found the ship, about the horses and the rain. They listened very carefully, and long after I had finished, one said, "The question is not what or how. The question is why." We sat in silence together and thought about this all night. And the next day they said, "There is only one way to find out. We have to go all the way back and see it all for ourselves." We agreed, and the sun turned black, and in one beat of the heart, we visited every battlefield that ever existed, and witnessed every war that was ever fought, and suffered every wound ever inflicted by man. We arrived at the first fall, and here we rested, and the generals who didn't even cry when they were a baby broke down, and together we wept for 1,000 years, until we saw the light of the sun return to the high hall. On that note, I want to raise my glass and have a drink in honor of the general. Let's pretend this is scotch. Ooh. I remembered the story about a boy they call the mysterious foundling, who was switched at birth and raised in a dungeon on bread and water, and only taught to say one sentence. At the age of 16, he was released into society, and they watched and studied closely as he was adopted by the people. In the end, he was tricked and stabbed. And after only having lived 5 years under the sun, he forgave his murderer. I looked into the tired faces of the generals, and without thinking I said, "There is no place like home." Before my eyes, the Emperor Penguin appeared in the middle of the table and said, "Now comes the tour." A green light went on, and the whole table sunk into the ground, and we traveled down a tunnel that led to the bottom of a mountain with a hole on top, so far away that it had the size of a pinhead. We walked into a wide room with a river running through it, and the walls were made of purple crystals. The general stopped and said, "This is our fleet." I didn't see anything that looked like a fleet, and I tried to look closer, and the harder I tried to see, the more I seemed to lose sight. The generals began to snicker, and my puzzlement caused them a great deal of amusement, and the snickering turned into outright laughter, and I couldn't help but to laugh with them. When we finished laughing, they told me, "Close your eyes and stretch out your hand." After I stood like that for a while, I felt a savory heat in my hand, like a ball of fire that was rolling through my body, and it felt as if a little sun was rising in my chest. I opened my eyes, and there I found myself vis-à-vis a baby dragon, the size of an elephant, that was sniffing my hand. And behind him I saw 13 bigger dragons, more magnificent than I could have ever imagined. They had the same color as the crystals on the wall, and they moved without making a sound. The general smiled and explained. One dragon carries more smoothly than 5,000 horses. Only visible to those they choose. We have visited many times since then. And when the world is ready to find out that Siegfried defeated the wrong enemy, we are coming home forever. I was very happy to hear that, and felt that this mission of the first Space Force Mascot was coming to an end, and I wondered, how do I get home? And when the generals answered, "Baby Dragon will take you. He knows the way by heart," I was the happiest camper on earth. And before leaving, the generals asked me to let you know that the first war won is the war against yourself. Thank you for listening. See you again next time.